The Shaman are easily one of my favorite additions to Elden Ring's story that we learned about in the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. Their lore gives us a look into the motivations behind Messmer's brutal crusade against the Hornsent, and provides us with key insights into major historical events that set into motion Marika's ascension to becoming God Ruler of the Lands Between. But what if I were to tell you that we seem to have only scratched the surface of the Shaman's lore? I welcome you, Tarnished, to join me, Zayf the Scholar, as I try to uncover the real-world inspirations behind Elden Ring Shaman and learn a lot of interesting history and facts along the way. Let's talk about it. But before we get into all the details, I'd like to shout out this video's sponsor, Displate, a company making beautiful metal posters that let you easily transform a room into a space that reflects your unique passions. And for me, that means finally getting my hands on some awesome, officially licensed Elden Ring and Dark Souls artwork to go on my walls. And guys, no joke, these things look amazing. Check out this beautifully detailed print of Needle Knight Leda that I got in a matte finish that looks just absolutely stunning. Displate actually sent over several beautiful Elden Ring designs for me to look at, but my favorite has to be this map of the Lands Between, in what they call their textura finish, which adds dimensions of depth and texture that truly pop and bring the artwork to life. And with Displate's no hassle, no damage magnetic mounting system, getting them onto my wall or swapping designs was a piece of cake, no tools needed. With over 2 million artworks to choose from, including officially licensed designs from your favorite franchises, you're sure to find something that suits you. So, what are you waiting for? You can click the discount link in the description or use my code on screen at checkout to get some sweet savings on some beautiful artwork and support the channel in the process. Win-win. Thanks a ton for your attention, and thanks again to Displate for sponsoring this video. So, in order to deepen our understanding of the Shaman and what they represent to Elden Ring's story, we first have to talk a little bit about the original Japanese text. If you're new to my videos, you should know that I'm a fluent Japanese speaker, and for this video my research will be drawing on both English and Japanese language research materials. I also went through multiple consultations with native Japanese speakers to make sure I'm presenting things as accurately as possible. And for this video in particular, I was able to reach out to several Japanese filmmakers who kindly provided me with footage of some important cultural sites and practices that I'll be discussing in the video. I'll get more into that later, but links and information for all of this can be found in the video description. Okay, so first, I'd like to clear up some common misconceptions about the Shaman that I've seen repeated in some comments in my videos, as well as elsewhere on the internet. The biggest one being that the term shaman is an unfaithful translation from the original Japanese text. Armed with Google Translate, some people were very quick to throw FromSoft's translation team under the bus and claim that in the original Japanese, the shaman are referred to as Miko, the common Japanese word for priestess or shrine maiden. And therefore they argued the English translation shaman is a misrepresentation of Miyazaki's original intent. And while this might seem like a reasonable stance at first, having some knowledge of Japanese characters or kanji here goes a long way. Particularly if you know how Miyazaki often uses kanji in interesting and novel ways to create the potential for more ambiguous or veiled interpretations. And the characters chosen to write Miko here are a good case in point. Normally, the word Miko is written like this. The first character in isolation is commonly translated as medium, i.e. someone who's able to communicate with the spirits of the dead. The second character is a bit more straightforward, in that it just basically means female or woman. So put these two together and you get Miko, the common word for shrine maiden or priestess. And this combination of kanji actually does appear at multiple places in Elden Ring. The Dragon Communion Priestess Florisax, for example, is referred to as Ryusai no Miko, or quite literally, the Dragon Communion Priestess. But here's the important part. This is not the spelling chosen to refer to the Shadow of the Erdtree's shaman. Instead, the character for medium on the left is retained, while the character for female is removed, and replaced with the character for child. And with this character swapped out, reading and interpreting this word becomes a lot more ambiguous. For one thing, this particular combination of kanji isn't something that commonly appears in Japanese dictionaries. However, according to the Japanese website Kotobank, these characters are a less common alternative spelling for the word ichiko, which, in turn, is an ancient way of referring to a specific subgroup of shrine maidens known as the Itako. And here is where things get really interesting, because the Itako are not just Shinto priestesses, but rather a very specific subset of priestesses with some really interesting connections to Elden Ring Shaman, Marika, Shaman Village, and Dominula Windmill Village. So, who exactly are the Itako? According to Japanese scholar Sasamori Takefusa, the Itako are a small group of female priestesses found in northeastern Japan in the Tohoku region. The Itako tradition is ancient, existing since at least 1773, but today there are fewer than 3 carrying on the tradition. Unlike traditional Miko or shrine maidens, the Itako have several discerning and relevant characteristics that set them apart. For one thing, historically the Itako were all blind, and their blindness was believed to give them a special connection to the spirit world and the ability to perform kuchiose, the channeling of the voices of the deceased. The Itako were thus shaman, in a very literal sense of the word, people who could act as intermediaries between the natural and supernatural worlds. And thanks to an email exchange I had with the Kawazu Media Group, I've actually been provided with some footage to show you of Japan's last living blind shaman, a woman named Nakamura Take. I'll leave links and information to the Kawazu Project in the video description and recommend you check them out if these type of topics interest you.
川も渡りで、のりの花咲く道を通りで、ここが座る場所というところに成仏させてもらったから、供養のおかげで役人どもに導いてもらって安心しているから、それは届けてみたい。成仏できたことは
As you just saw, during their kuchiose rituals, the Itako become literal vessels for the souls of the dead, who are believed to speak their words through them. It's a bit on the nose, but this all seems to track quite nicely with the jar-related metaphors in Elden Ring's story, along with the lore of the shaman, since Elden Ring's jars are literally communal vessels for housing the souls and the spirits of others. But the connection between the Itako and Elden Ring shaman don't stop there. If we take a look at how the shaman are depicted in the DLC, it's quite clear that they're all female, and all wearing blindfolds or eye coverings of some sort. And if we look at the grandmother of Shaman Village, where Marika left her braid behind in tribute, her eyes are also obscured. So is it possible that Elden Ring shaman were blind like the Itako? Is this maybe what gave them their unique ability to meld with others, and to subsequently be targeted by the Hornsent to become vessels for the souls of their criminals? And while we're on the topic of the shaman grandmother, let's talk a little bit about the word used to refer to her in the original Japanese text, which is Oba. In the English version, this word gets officially translated as the grandmother, which I've seen many people interpret to mean that this woman is Marika's blood relative, her literal grandmother or great-grandmother. And while that could be the case, we should note that Miyazaki again chose an unconventional term here that could be interpreted in multiple ways. And this particular atypical word choice is yet another thing that gets more interesting when looking at the history of the Itako. According to Japanese historian Esashika Hitoshi, the founder of the Itako was a blind shrine maiden known as the Taiso Ba, which literally translates to something like the founding grandmother. After formalizing the Itako techniques and rituals for channeling the dead, the Taiso Ba handed down her teachings to a disciple, who then began recruiting other blind women to train in these arts. And thus the tradition of blind female shaman, or Itako, was born. And so yet again, I don't think it's a stretch to think that the real founding grandmother of Japan's Itako, the Taiso Ba, may have served as an inspiration for the grandmother of the shaman, or Oba, that's depicted in Elden Ring's Shaman Village. The grandmother of Shaman Village that Marika paid tribute to with her braid thus probably wasn't her literal great-grandmother, but rather a matriarchal figurehead that founded Shaman Village and their traditions. But there's another really important and I think compelling connection to be made here between the real Itako and Elden Ring Shaman. If you weren't too traumatized from the fight itself, most of you guys probably remember this bit from the opening cutscene of the Dancing Lion fight, in which the Hornsent Grandam has some less than kind things to say about Marika.
Dance and reward, tens all the wit, cruelty, woe, and those who plague the tongue. Cleanse away the strumpet's vile agony.
Now, I had always personally assumed that this reference to Marika as a strumpet or loose woman was perhaps in reference to the seduction and the betrayal mentioned in Elden Ring's DLC story trailer.
The seduction and the betrayal, an affair from which gold arose.
And to be fair, that certainly could still be true. However, when reading through some research papers on the history of the Itako that I'll link in the description, I found something interesting. Whereas Japanese shrine maiden traditionally serve in subordinate roles to male Shinto priests, the Itako existed within an entirely matriarchal system, outside of the religious mainstream of the time. And as a result of this, they were often looked down upon by the traditional Shinto establishment, who disparaged them as charlatans that threatened to pollute the purity of their religion. In fact, according to one religious scholar, groups like the Itako were commonly objects of contempt and, quote, were often considered to have loose morals or even to prostitute themselves. So that got me thinking, is it possible that rather than referring to some sort of lurid affair that Marika committed, the Grandam refers to her in this way because she views Marika and the other shaman as an impure perversion of the Hornsent's religious beliefs? And I think this gets even more convincing when you consider the fact that the Hornsent also have their own shamanic practices. The divine beast dancing lions themselves are an example of spirit invocation, and the Hornsent Grandam seems to actually be a literal shaman of sorts, since she appears to channel a spirit to take control of the dancing lion that we fight in the Bellarat Tower settlement, and even defends herself with the spell Watchful Spirit when attacked. So perhaps the jar ritual process then was an attempt by the Hornsent to assimilate and absorb the practices of the shaman into their own culture, before they could flourish into something that grew out of their control, a way of dealing with what they viewed as a problematic new religious sect that threatened to disrupt their established order. Slightly backfired a bit if that's the case, but hey, live and learn, right? So I think all of these connections between the Itako and Elden Ring Shaman are pretty compelling so far, but there's actually some other evidence worth considering. However, we'll have to go on a little journey to a remote area in northern Japan to do so. Located in the caldera of a volcano, it isn't hard to see why Osorezan is believed in Japanese mythology to be one of the gateways to the underworld, a liminal borderland between this world and the next. Every year, Japan's Itako famously journeyed here to Osorezan to practice their spirit channeling rituals, and thus it has become inextricably linked to the practices of the Itako and their communications with the dead. Besides the otherworldly landscape itself, one striking feature of Osorezan is the presence of hundreds of colorful pinwheels, or what in Japanese are called kazaguruma. The gentle spinning of the pinwheels is believed to provide calm and comfort to the spirits dwelling here. Another standout feature of Osorezan is the presence of a statue of a mythological figure known as the Datsueba. The Datsueba is a supernatural entity believed to take the form of an ugly old woman. who strips the clothes from the spirits of criminals and others who committed a great number of misdeeds. These guilty spirits are forced to pass through a treacherous river that represents traversal to the spirit realm. Upon reaching the other side of the river, the Datsueba would take the clothes of the damned and weigh them, and pass judgments on the spirits, with the weight of the water their clothes absorbed representing the weight of their sins. It was also said that if a soul had no clothes to offer, the Datsueba would instead strip them of their flesh. So, a coastal village associated with objects that gently spin in the wind, and an ugly old woman with an interest in taking people's skin. Does that ring any bells? This sounds quite similar to what we find in Elden Ring's Dominula Windmill Village, where we not only find a stranded spirit who's cowering in fear about having his skin removed, but also find multiple zombie-like hags who bear a certain resemblance to Osodezan's Datsueba. While we don't have any colorful pinwheels, we do have colorful flowers and windmills. And in fact, the Japanese word for windmill, fusha, is written with the exact same characters as the word pinwheel. So Pinwheel Village and Windmill Village would actually be written with the exact same Japanese kanji. And while I won't go into all the details here, in this video on the card I go over numerous ties between Shaman Village and Dominula, including the fact that Dominula's inhabitants wear their hair in a single braided style, perhaps in reference to Marika's tribute to the Shaman grandmother. So let's see if we can't connect some dots here. We have the real-life Itako, an all-female group of blind shaman associated with mystical powers that allow them to become vessels for the dead. The Itako originate with a matriarchal figure known as the Taiso Ba, or founding grandmother. And while not persecuted per se, they were looked down upon by the religious mainstream of their time, who pushed them out of sacred religious sites, and at times even disparaged them as prostitutes. And finally, the Itako are tied to Osodezan, a place linked to colorful pinwheels and a mythological figure with the appearance of an old hag who takes people's flesh. Next we have Elden Ring Shaman, which in the Japanese is written in characters that seem to reference the Itako. And like the Itako, the Shaman are similarly blind and possess mystical powers that allow them to become vessels for the dead. The Shaman were looked down upon and persecuted by the Hornsent, and Marika, the most prominent shaman, is disparagingly referred to by the Hornsent Grandam as a strumpet.
Dance and kavod, cleanse all that thou wilt, cruelty, woe, and those who plague the tower, cleanse away the strumpet's vile progeny.
Elden Ring Shaman Village doesn't have colorful pinwheels, but is covered in beautiful colorful flowers, and the village, and by extension the shaman, seems to have been led by a matriarchal figure known as the Oba, or great-grandmother, to whom Marika paid tribute with a braid of her hair. And finally we have Dominula, home to yet another all-female religious group with a predilection for colorful flowers. Other notable features of Dominula are its windmills, and of course its old hag celebrants, with a thing for taking people's flesh. Dominula's cultists wear their hair in a single braid, and wear symbols with strong links to Marika and the Golden Order. So in short, it's of course impossible to speak with certainty, but I feel like there's a decent chance that the history and mythology surrounding the Itako and Osodezan served as a strong point of inspiration for FromSoft when creating the lore of the Shaman, Shaman Village, and Dominula Windmill Village. The blind Itako's ability to serve as spirit vessels became Elden Ring's blind shaman's ability to blend with the spirits and flesh of others. The colorful pinwheels of Osodezan became the windmills and colorful flowers of Shaman Village and Dominula. And a myth about an old hag who skins people became a cult of zombie-like women who skin people. At the very least, I think all of this provides us with a fairly compelling reason why the Hornsent Grandam calls Marika a strumpet. But what do you guys think? Do these connections sound plausible to you? In any case, as I was researching for this video, I found myself genuinely invested in learning more about the Itako and their history, and I hope you guys all found it interesting as well. I would again like to thank the Kawazu Project for sharing their footage of the Itako with me, and I highly encourage you to check out the links in the description for their full video and others like it. Lastly, I would like to point out that as I was nearing completion of this script, I came across an article by a writer named Mirko who pointed out the connection between the Shaman and the Itako well before I did. I'll link to his article in the description as well, so you can check it out if you're interested. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. It really helps out my channel a lot, and I genuinely appreciate it. And hey, I'd also appreciate it if you considered supporting my work by becoming a patron, a YouTube member, or buying me a coffee. Thanks a ton for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.